I will be your host today, your facilitator, the one asking questions and sharing a little bit of background on this report. My name's Riley Smith. I've been with Propeller Consulting for over 7 years. We also have Jonathan and Jillian from our marketing team on the call, just helping us run this webinar, and we'll introduce Joy and Patrick here shortly. We'll be monitoring questions throughout the day, which will save time at the end to answer, or I'll try to answer throughout. Massive thank you to all those attending this webinar. We're just super excited to be hosting such a great group and sharing our insights for 2025 in this change environment. For those new to Propeller Consulting, we're a management consulting firm focused on helping organizations move through transformation faster, more effectively. Our teams are locally based in Portland, the Bay, Denver, and Dallas, but we work with clients virtually across the country and even worldwide. What makes us different, in my mind, having been here for 7 years, is that we don't just deliver plans. We really work side by side, embedded with our clients to navigate really ambiguous problems and actually make the change happen end to end. And one of the things that I take pride in is not just helping land those incomes, but two, and I heard this even on a client call this morning, just ensuring that our clients enjoy working with their consulting partner, making it really easy for them. So that's a little bit about Propeller, which you see there on the left of this slide as well. A little bit about me before I hand it over to our panelists. I first started at Propeller as a change management consultant. Now I lead our change management services at Propeller, which means I have the privilege of kind of managing our most senior change consultants, supporting large-scale strategic projects across retail, tech, energy, public sector, amongst many others, and do some of the thought leadership items that we're doing here today, like hosting this webinar. I've led and organized our insights gathering activities today for the past 4 years, and as mentioned, facilitating the convo today, including some questions to our panelists. Let me turn it over to Patrick to introduce himself.
Yeah, hey, thanks a lot, Riley. And hi, everyone. Great to have you here today. I'm Patrick McMullen. I'm a consultant really focused on data, strategy, and AI. And over nearly 15 years, I've had experience supporting global leaders across a whole range of industries. And at Propeller, I sit within our tech and data service line. And so that has me working across our AI committee and business and data insights practice. Because I love turning complexity and uncertainty into actionable intelligence that really helps drive those lasting strategic impacts. So now let me pass it to Joy.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Riley. So my name is Joy Wadawa. I'm based in our Propeller's Denver office, and I'm a senior change consultant at Propeller. I'm also a consulting manager. I specialize in organizational development and effectiveness consulting, and have been doing that for over 10 years. Before that, I worked in various internal comms roles and also in academia. So happy to be here today. Back to you, Riley.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Joy. Before we hop into the insights, let's get into a little bit of the methodology. The 2025 report's an annual exploration of the who, what, and how of change. We do utilize an independent survey firm, and we typically cap our audience to around 400 plus respondents that represent various functions, industries, and role types, with the statistics shown here. This year, we saw 53% of our respondents at a senior management level or above, as well as a majority of our respondents, as you see on the left, 56% coming from IT, operations, and HR. Additionally, over 76% of our respondents say they manage change as part of their role. Each year, we ask an assemblage of questions, some that are recurring that allow us to see year-over-year comparisons, and some that are on special topics that address trends in the marketplace. We combine this quantitative approach with a qualitative lens per our experience leading transformation across our clients. As we hop into those year-over-year trends, let us recall this 4-year period we are in, having ran this report for that length of time. Our insights have covered the pandemic, the competitive talent market of 2021, the great resignation, supply chain pressures, and now the launch of AI in the marketplace, amongst many other things that you're all dealing with, certainly. And as we said in last year's report, change is not a leaky faucet, one drop at a time for our clients. It's a flowing current of change. Really looking back to that first question you entered here today in our poll. Our first insight confirms that change is not going anywhere. It's ever present, where an average of 90% of our respondents over 4 years say significant change is happening at their company. Our research in last year's eBooks confirms this, where we saw a 38% rise in significant change events just over those last few years, which is substantiated from some additional research by Gartner, whose research goes back to 2011, where change events have increased 18x from 2011 to 2025. So that volume of change is certainly hitting, and certainly, as I mentioned, ever present. As we know, change adoption is still hard. We've seen a 15% increase over the past 3 years of struggling to enable change, notably here in this second graph, really around training, communication, and how teams integrate with their PM as leading indicators of that struggle, and our largest jump since when we first started in 2021. And again, you could probably think about the volume of change being a driver of some of this struggle. And those that have struggled the most frequently have CMs aligned to the PMO or the HR organizations, where you see 2/3 of our respondents who say their org that has a low change capability, that's where change is housed. And that's normalized by the number of respondents that we have in this survey as well. This, of course, is just a few highlights for us data nerds on the call. Please hop into the report and kind of read into each of these as well. We could riff through a few more year-over-year trends, but these are the ones that stood out to me. Of course, if you are interested in a deeper exploration of change management that pertains to your industry, your function, or specifically have a request for us to dig into different data that you don't see here today, please reach out to me per the call to action at the end of this webinar. And definitely click the link that Jillian just included in the chat to read through the report. Let's now kind of transition into the 2025 insights that we'll be covering today. So related to these year-over-year trends, we're seeing that leaner budgets are forcing a smarter approach to change. And this is really twofold. One, we're seeing a 12% reduction in investments in change management. And two, as mentioned before, the reduction in budgets being combined with a more significant change events in a given year, i.e. change saturation. Those two are going in the opposite directions and hence require optimized approaches to change, which we'll explore in one of our insights. We've asked for a second year in a row now a series of questions around AI adoption, and ensure we'll learn that most are still in the formation stages. What we know, and what Patrick will really emphasize, is that AI is a people challenge primarily. And Patrick will explore more in this space and provide those action steps, 5 of which we call out here. And as we endeavor to continue to do more with less, a theme we've seen across a few reports now, we're seeing a higher need to ensure that the talent we have has the skills to drive org outcomes. And that companies often don't have a real-time view of this through the talent lifecycle. Our third insight that Joy will cover addresses how talent alignment is a top challenge for those who are doing organizational alignment activities. So now, that's enough from Riley today. Let's pivot to our folks who have the deep expertise in this space. Let's pivot into talking about trends and change management with Joy. And let me open up with a question to you, Joy. Our research showed that 16% fewer respondents feel that organizations successfully managing change this year. What's your perspective on kind of the key drivers of this?
Yeah, thanks, Riley. So there's likely many issues at play here that our data didn't capture, including steadily declining levels of employee engagement. Some of you may have read the recent Gallup report that showed engagement levels dropping to a 10-year low in late 2024. So certainly that is probably fueling some of this. That said, we did find some interesting trends in our year-over-year data that may also be fueling this pretty massive 16% drop in successful change management. So I think Riley touched on this in his intro, but we saw a 15% increase in reliance on PMOs or HR to manage change as opposed to a centralized function. And that's among the folks that are reporting unsuccessful change. So why is this an issue, you might ask? It means that we have change efforts happening on a project-by-project basis more often. And that means they don't always benefit from input on the broader organizational context. For example, Are your target employees already undergoing a lot of change? Do they have the mental and emotional space to absorb change coming from so many different directions? We completely understand why companies choose this route. Stakeholder alignment is easier. Teams can work faster when they're smaller and more concentrated, but there's a trade-off. This agility can come at the expense of the employee experience. So that's one of the first ones. Another data point is that a large majority of organizations are characterizing their company as culturally fragmented. That's at 62%, so it's pretty big, as opposed to culturally cohesive. So there's some good news, bad news going on here. The good news is that despite being fragmented, 51% of respondents say that despite this fragmentation, they feel their teams have a high capacity for change. But we still think this is an opportunity area because companies that are more culturally cohesive and unified have higher engagement and are more change resilient just generally. Finally, we saw a surge in companies citing training as a top challenge in managing change, coupled to an increase in lack of skills as a primary challenge, especially in AI adoption, which I know Patrick is going to touch on in more depth for us later. So we know that training as a challenge isn't really new. You saw that in some of the initial data slides, but it becomes more interesting when we see it was far less top of mind for people in 21 and 2022. In those years, the leading challenges with implementing change were more focused on things like communication, adoption, managing resistance, and sponsorship. So training is really getting its moment in the spotlight this year and in 2024. And again, we think there's a few things going on here. One is that new technologies and ways of working, like AI, again, more to come, are forcing rapid evolution of skill sets. And also, there's a higher focus on talent alignment just generally in the market, which I'm going to dive into more later. So I'll kind of wrap that part of this slide here and pass it back to you for now on that topic, Riley.
Yeah, Joy, I want to go back to the culture unity versus fragmentation and explore that a little bit more. Can you say more about why unified culture helps drive successful organizational change?
Yeah. Yeah, so in the change management literature and kind of thought leadership, it's really well known that having a more adaptive culture with a high capacity for change strongly underpins change success. So to bring this to life, think of teams you've worked on that are super high trust, where team members regularly lean in to support one another, they assume positive intent, and are psychologically safe, providing real feedback. Such teams are not only super high performing, but often are way more capable of weathering shifts and adapting as a unit. And in this way, culture is just a huge driver of transformation success generally. So when cultures are fragmented, it can be a challenge to align teams across the organization to the same North Star. The narrative that works for one team might really not resonate with another one, especially if they have a really different view on your company's purpose and your overall opportunity areas. So I think the key takeaway here is that organizations should constantly attend to building a strong culture so that they're change ready. And a few common ways to do this, there's a lot, but a few of the most common ones are to really invest in leadership excellence because you've got those managers who have high visibility and they have big impact. And also having a really strong story, vision, and strategy that employees across the company can connect to.
Yeah, and we'll be doing this for all of our insights, right? We want to kind of paint the environment, but we also want to make this actionable. So those are the top pain points emerging out of last year. And we also know change management budgets are leaner. So how should companies start to think about opportunity areas and kind of how they invest?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so you can see we've got three key opportunity areas at a high level on this slide. So the first one is to really maintain a portfolio level lens when you're seeking to drive change. The second one is to support cultural unity, which I just talked about, to drive change success and overall engagement. And then the third one is to consider low lift but high impact investments in skills training. So on the first point, to go a little deeper, and again, reiterating, we fully recognize that centralizing change management efforts is easier said than done. And with constrained budgets, hiring new roles or introducing a new function just might not be practical. But that said, this is totally the gold standard in change effectiveness. That's where we see the highest maturity companies kind of organizing their change efforts. But if that's not practical for you, we recommend introducing new processes and expectations around aligning the approach to change. So lighter weight items like playbooks, templates, and a key part of this should be a requirement to sync up your transformation plans across the business. So make sure your teams have an understanding of your company's change portfolio and empower someone in senior leadership to make an informed call about how much change the organization should be taking on in any given year for any given audience.
Right.
On the second point, I think we've sufficiently addressed that one in your last question, Riley, so I'm not going to belabor that one. And I am going to dive in a little bit more to the third one. So on this final recommendation, we suggest being really thoughtful about approaches to changing behavior through training. When most people think of training, they immediately go to heavier weight options like developing e-learning or instructor-led training or learning journeys. However, when it comes to developing skills, not just kind of conveying knowledge, instead of investing in more passive experiences, and training doesn't always have to be passive, organizations should prioritize ways to get people hands-on, using the skills in the flow of work with use cases that are highly relevant and applicable to what they are trying to achieve or change. So this means instead of instructor-led training, put more energy into things like just-in-time performance support, task-based workbooks, gigs, or rotation programs. The great thing is these can be really personalized to the employees, can be fairly low lift to develop, compared to something like an end-to-end learning journey.
Perfect. Thank you, Joy. Super insightful. And as we endeavor on all of these three, hoping to provide some actionable takeaways, we obviously are now transitioning to our second insight on AI and change. And to start us off, I have a question for you, Patrick. We just heard about shrinking change budgets from Joy, and now we're moving to talk about the people challenges of AI implementations. Help connect the dots here.
Yeah. Thanks, Joy. Thanks, Riley. There's definitely a bit of a double-edged sword going on, because on one side, the need for investing in AI means that many companies are looking to offset, reducing those other cost centers. But on the other side, we're also seeing a lot of reports about organizations slowing or even discontinuing their AI investments after recent initiatives really failed to deliver expected value. And yet a third angle that I'm excited to talk about more is, successful AI implementations tend to happen when teams spend more on change management than they would for non-AI digital transformations.
Okay, so a third angle, you had a double-edged sword. Is this a triple-edged sword, Patrick? Which sounds a little net new, a little hashtaggy here. How does this all relate to kind of people and change then?
Triple-edged sword. Oh gosh. Okay,
Yeah.
but together, right? It really means that the best path forward is to be very deliberate about where to invest in AI, and from the get-go, dedicating budget to people and change management, and that should occur before, during, and after deployments. And so, I want to walk through, several of the challenges related to AI adoption, and then some approaches to closing the gap between objectives and results. And so by the end, it should be very clear that AI implementation is primarily a people challenge. And that's exactly what you see here in this quote from Mark Fitzgerald. And so this slide displays 4 key people-related challenges getting in the way of successful AI adoption and deployment. And first, I'll talk about the employee confidence. Year over year, we noted a sharp drop in employees' self-reported optimism for AI solutions, from 75% to 47%. And that decline can be attributed to multiple factors. A lot of those factors are also stated as the causes for the relatively high failure rate of AI projects. In a 2024 research report from RAND, they noted that 80% of AI projects are deemed failures by the teams working on them. And that's double the failure rate of other types of IT projects. Some of the very top drivers of these failed implementations are a lack of direction or strategy for what AI problems should solve, or low availability and or low quality of model training data, and too much focus on AI's tech foundations rather than the users and use cases. And this is all on top of ongoing concerns among workers that fear they may be made redundant by AI. And we also see a connection between low employee confidence and a lackluster approach to AI governance. And so next, I'm going to talk about these governance gaps. And so it's actually one of the 6 categories in our recently developed AI readiness assessment, which, governance and risk management. Because as we uncovered while researching for this 2025 ebook, 27% of participants report little to no governance policies around AI. And while only around 21% report that their company has formalized AI governance policies. And in an AI governance article that Propeller published in February, 2 of our expert consultants explained how critical it is for organizations to match their AI governance approach very purposefully to the scope of their AI journeys. And those experts point out how the governance for an enterprise-wide AI transformation certainly requires proportionately more consideration than a targeted use case that won't directly reach most of the org. And the right approach to governance can absolutely help in overcoming change resistance. And so now I'm going to move on to that category. In a widely cited McKinsey report last year, they revealed that successful AI implementations come from groups spending $3 on change management for every $1 spent on AI development. And they also compared this to non-AI digital transformations. And those are often successful with dollar for dollar change costs compared to development expenses. So simply put, AI implementations are requiring 3 times the spend on change management to be successful. And remember how I mentioned a few minutes ago that AI deployments require larger change budgets? Yeah, that's true. And it's not only larger change budgets compared to other transformations, but the change budgets often should exceed the actual development costs. And we all know how paradigm shifting AI has been for nearly every industry. But old habits die hard or they languish in the shadows. And that's especially true without well-executed people and change efforts. And even when change resistance isn't a concern, organizations need to foster learning and development for employees who are intended to leverage AI systems. And so let's move to talk about skill set. In our research, nearly 40% of participants cited the lack of training and skills development as the primary barrier to successful AI rollouts. And in a November 2024 AI collaboration report, Atlassian revealed that less than 1/3 of the thousands of organizations they surveyed had provided AI-focused training and upskilling to even 25% of their workforce. And Atlassian's research targeted only knowledge workers. And these are the folks who are the most likely to encounter or leverage AI and machine learning in their roles. And this can be attributed to multiple factors. There's the often siloed nature of AI implementations, high perceived costs associated with learning and development programs, and like a lack of understanding or a lack of focus of what AI should and can do. And a lot more other factors, but all of them ultimately trace back to poor people and change policies.
Yeah, Patrick, as you wrap on this slide and kind of went through all of those challenges, we're very much in the realm of people and change. And we have a lot of this report is people and change. So I'm guessing the solutions on the next slide will be people focused. I just want to make sure I want to play devil's advocate to myself right here, right? Is this an example of us being kind of biased? Are we kind of cherry picking to fit today's topic? Would love your thoughts.
Oh, that's good question. Yeah, I wouldn't say like this is selection bias or like cherry picking. Yeah, sure. There are other factors associated with successful AI deployments. Especially stuff like your data quality and availability, underlying tech stack, budgets, and a lot more. But ultimately, the takeaway is that even when all those other stars align, AI initiatives are likely to fail unless there is a well-planned and well-executed approach to these people-related challenges. Yeah, even when it comes to data, tech, budget obstacles, the necessary transitions happen more effectively and efficiently through change management and ultimately getting people on the same page. So now let's talk about how we close the AI adoption gaps and foster successful implementations. Our full ebook provides 5 distinct approaches to closing the gap, and each of those 5, and including the 3 summarized on this slide, emphasize that AI is primarily a people challenge. This means organizations realizing ROI from AI are taking a people-first rather than tech-first approach. And so first, a key part of that approach is focusing on which business functions, workflows, processes, and teams should have AI embedded. Even for those enterprise-wide AI transformations, it's crucial for decision makers to know how AI should fit into every part of the business meant to utilize it. Embedding AI into more workflows and more roles requires greater investments in people and change. And all of that has to be put in place according to a sound AI strategy and governance model. Next, here in the middle, just like when we're hiring and transitioning a new teammate, AI use cases require distinct roles and responsibilities. And this is based on our own research, experience with client partners, and countless reports across industries that we've read. The companies winning the AI race are those treating AI as more of a team member than a toolkit. The last point on this slide is really all about establishing the right attitude for innovation and iterative improvements. And instilling this mindset is fully dependent on effective people and change management. We already heard a bit from Joy around, how to address fragmented company cultures. The powerful AI machine learning models that we have today were all made possible through feedback loops of experimentation and iteration. Some organizations already had that kind of cultural ethos, but we can all imagine how difficult it can be to instill a fail-forward attitude among teams who are used to long development cycles before deploying a perfected product. So on the last slide, we examined the 4 key drivers of AI adoption challenges. Here, summarizing 3 of the approaches for closing that gap to successful AI implementation. But hopefully now it's crystal clear that these problems and solutions really all boil down to how AI works with, for, and alongside your talent. So next, we're going to hear more about, the trends we've uncovered in talent alignment. So let me toss it back to Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And as I was looking at the Q&A already, we have a few coming in on AI. So excited to, at the end of this call, bring Patrick in and throw a few more AI questions at you. It's been very top of mind. It was great to get grounded in some new mindsets on this topic, which is obviously a continuous learning journey. So let's bring back Joy for our third and final insight and open up with a question on how talent alignment is a top challenge for organizational restructuring. Can you walk us through what we saw in this space and why talent alignment is kind of such a pain right now?
Yes. Before I dive into answering that, I just have to say there's so much to talk about, Patrick, with that investment in change management. Maybe we can circle back to it in the Q&A because it's such a rich topic. So thanks for that. Didn't pop out to me when we were prepping it. So now you're asking me about talent alignment, organizational restructuring. So you can see on this slide, when we asked about the top challenges, in organizational restructuring, our respondents told us that talent gaps and role overlaps are their largest problem, with lack of visibility into skills trailing right behind. So before diving more into these, I first want to connect this to what was by far the top driver for restructuring in 2024, and that's cost efficiencies. No surprise there. We have many organizations looking to reorganize for efficiency right now. And anyone who's been on the planning side of these activities knows that some of the first questions to be asked when an organization wants to pivot its strategy are things like, do we have the capabilities to support this shift? Does our structure support delivery of those capabilities? And finally, can our existing talent achieve those goals? If an organization doesn't have good visibility into the skills its employees possess and what skills are needed to support future capabilities, it becomes a big slowdown. They have to step back and figure that out before they can move forward effectively. So one, there's a visibility problem into skills, but there's also right now a real gap between what organizations are looking for to advance their strategic capabilities and what the talent market has to offer, which is another reason this pain point is probably rising to the top right now. To illustrate this point, again, some of you may have read this on the call, but in SHRM's 2024 talent report, they say that 1 in 4 FTE positions require new skills, and that a top reason these new skills are needed relate to organizational growth and changing technology. So connecting back to what Patrick was telling us. It also says, the SHRM report that is, that 3 in 4 organizations report it's really difficult right now to find qualified talent. with the necessary skills.
Yeah, so one comment and then one question, Joy. The one comment is this was, I think, a half dozen to maybe 9 options for kind of what is your top challenge in organizational realignment. So as you look at these numbers and you're like, they don't come off the page. This was one amongst, like I said, 6 to 10 selections. And so for our respondents to, respond so highly that this came to the top is something that I would call out. The question is this theme about talent data. How are data-driven approaches kind of fundamentally changing best practices for talent alignment?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a really important question, and that there's a lot going on here. So one of the things that's going on is that as restructuring has become more common in recent years, organizations have needed to do more to make talent alignment cost effective and apples to apples, if you will, across their organization. So this is one driver of the skills-based approaches we're hearing so much about right now. They are gaining so much traction because of the need to consolidate skills data to support restructuring as an ongoing alignment process instead of just that one and done event. We also have better tools than before to consolidate diverse data sources about employees, so not just skills, but also costs, locations, work activities, among others. And having this data all together makes eliminating talent data silos a really powerful way to more proactively perform strategic planning and workforce alignment. So it's really become a higher focus.
Awesome. So just like we've done for the previous insights, what tips do you have for the folks on the call, how to become more data-driven and how they align talent?
Yeah. So for the first one, I'll just say, has anyone, and I know I can't see your hands, but I'll just say it anyways, has anyone on the call ever been in spreadsheet or PowerPoint hell when trying to manage a restructure? So the C-suite keeps, very rightfully asking for more scenarios and trying to understand the headcount and budget implications. And each time a request is made, you find yourself going back and regenerating sometimes hundreds of slides and updating detailed budget models. And then you have to go in and also align the talent to the new positions and the updated organizational structures. And the whole thing is just kind of a huge slowdown. So the key insight here is to be suspicious of spreadsheets. And it's not just because spreadsheets are not my personal favorite thing. It's also, if you find yourself using one during a restructure, consider whether it's worth investing in a more centralized evergreen tool. For example, we partner with OrgView, which is a tool that, among other things, can accelerate efficiencies in the restructuring process by centralizing all that data and enabling way more rapid visualizations and scenario building. On the second point, leverage existing HR data. If you don't want to use a tool like OrgView to simplify end-to-end restructuring process, I think the key insight here is just, hey, take a look at what you already have. You might have an existing tool like Workday or SAP SuccessFactors that has an ability to help you start building out your talent in a more, your skills database in a more kind of like data-driven way. So just take a look at that and see if there's opportunities there. And then this final recommendation is about how to think about your skills data. So we know there's some great products on the market right now that provide detailed skills menus across many roles and functions, but we recommend that you resist adopting those menus wholesale. This should be an activity aligned to not only your talent strategy, but also your business strategy. Use that as an opportunity to support your future state capability building instead of merely reflecting the status quo. So, for example, in projects, we've seen a lot of the times people will go out and kind of survey managers to say, hey, what skills do you think are related to this role in order to customize those skills menus? And I think that's a great practice, but we're saying do that and make sure that you're bringing your business leaders in, because it's just such a cool opportunity to really be forward thinking in how you're adapting kind of your skills database and your skills approach.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to both Patrick and Joy for sharing their review of our research, and thanks to the many colleagues of mine on the Propeller team who contributed to organizing and analyzing this report. We're a handful of minutes ahead of schedule, which I appreciate. And one good leading indicator is I haven't seen a massive drop-off during this webinar, so that does tell me there's insightful actions happening. So thank you for those folks holding on and listening throughout the report. Before we hop into questions, Wanted to share my email address here. Should you have further conversations, as I mentioned earlier, about, hey, I want to dig into this specific question. I want to dig into this specific data point. I'd like to grab Patrick's time. All of those are earnest and good questions. So please reach out. You can also find us on LinkedIn, as Jillian just entered our LinkedIn profiles into the chat. So for those of you dropping off now, many thanks for your attendance and engagement today. But for those sticking around, we do have a set of questions coming in along the way. So let's spend some time, grab a few of those, and please continue to ask questions into the chat so we can have a robust conversation. My first question is, I think this one's for Joy. Why do you think employee engagement's at a 10-year low? Speak to me more about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. What I've read on this, so I'm not being super data informed in my response here, but what I've read on this is that there's a few things going on. I think all of our minds are going to go immediately to like, oh, that's when we all shifted to remote work. And, so that's like a huge kind of driving factor in reduced employee engagement. And I think it is. The challenges around kind of hybrid work policies are a factor there. So that's one thing that people talk about. But there's other things that people talk less about with the engagement problem right now. And one of those is around just this, and we've talked about it this whole time, this constant change. So I think, Riley, you pointed this out at the beginning, when we're constantly seeing these large change efforts, big restructurings, people are change saturated and they get tired. And so I think that is one of the things I've read that could be driving some of the engagement issues. And then a final one I've read that I think is really interesting is around kind of performance management. And we see there's a new generation, younger folks, and there's generational preferences in how people receive feedback and how they're managed. And in some cases, performance management approaches where, you've got a mid-year check-in and maybe one other meeting throughout the year are kind of not meeting the expectations of this rising generation in the workforce who wants more continuous feedback and kind of different, more personalized approaches to their performance management. And so those are kind of three of the things. I'm sure there's other things if other people have ideas to add on, to pile on there, super open to that. But those are top of mind for me.
Well, I want to hop to AI because we've got a few coming here. So Patrick and Joy, I invite you into the conversation too. But we have somebody on the call saying they're exploring AI pilots, but there's kind of real skepticism around this among the staff. Kind of any tips for increasing buy-in? How do you build trust kind of without overhyping the tech, if you will?
It's a really great question. And, I think there's all kinds of reasons for the skepticism. And, there's also, it's not uncommon for folks to be overhyping and being like, AI can solve all of these problems. But the people who are skeptical, they sometimes are scared. They're like, well, if AI solves that problem, I'm the one that solves that problem. So what does that mean for me? Kind of going back to that idea of like, is AI going to take my job or make me redundant? And so like my first thought to this is really around like emphasizing personal benefits and growth opportunities that are unlocked through AI. And so kind of going back to some of what I talked about around learning and development, but even if an org doesn't yet have formalized training focused on AI or machine learning, they might recommend that employees find or take self-directed courses to grow these skills, or recommend some courses that folks can take while they're trying to fine-tune like an official learning and development program. And this can really have the effect of like dispelling concerns that AI is going to take people's jobs, because there are already so many new career paths that are available thanks to AI. Employees who are skeptical, it could be because they think, again, it's coming for their job, or I could do a better job than AI. AI's black box of not being able to interpret how it's making these decisions. And these are the kind of employees that often we want to keep engaged and give them that confidence that if you invest in yourself while we invest in these new technologies, then there's more opportunities for you. We're going to ask more of you, promotions, new positions, and hey, even if that doesn't open up within the organization the person's already in, they're future-proofing themselves and really making themselves available to another company that's going to recognize those skills. And so I think it's about encouraging folks to buy into the organization they're already a part of, while also letting them know, like, regardless of where you're going in the future, this is going to serve you well. And personally, it might save you some time in the work you're already doing.
Can I pile in there really fast before we move on to the next question? So
Yeah.
I love what you just said, Patrick, about really focusing on the what's in it for me for AI implementation. I feel like there can be a big focus on training just because we know that there's this skill gap. But I feel like once you have people show up, butt in seat at a training or opt into training, you've already overcome 90% of their resistance. So really, really like making that case for change and being like, what's in it for you and your career development and where you're going, like that's where the money focus is, at least at the start, to kind of get people over that hump. So really, really like that.
All right, more AI questions coming in, as expected. So continue, folks. This is fantastic. Next one, Patrick, I'll invite you to start. Joy, please continue to hop in. How much of the AI challenges are around poorly managed expectations? AI is seen as magic, and that's consistent with the data point we shared earlier in this webinar of so much excitement and such a large job just in 1 year of us asking that question. Kind of once you get into the weeds of implementation, it still has limitations, it still has dependencies, it still has, fallible people using it in processes. So yeah, Patrick, how do you kind of talk about those challenges around expectations?
Yeah, well, I love that question on a lot of levels. I think first, when I think about managing expectations, I'm thinking about how these expectations are coming from a lot of different angles. You've got the expectations from your executives or your leaders because they want to keep customers happy. They want to keep shareholders happy. And many times these people, they're setting their expectations around matching or surpassing these AI market leaders that they hear about, rather than thinking about it within, the scope or the capabilities of their existing company and staff. You've also got like the technical teams or the data scientists, IT staff. They often focus a lot on the technical foundations or like the advanced capabilities made possible through machine learning models. And that can be kind of disconnected to actual business strategy or how to find, the most value the quickest, or, taking those low-hanging fruit that can have the big impact. And you've got, like the finance teams, and they can either be overly optimistic around the potential ROI from AI, or they might have pessimistic expectations for like, how much an AI implementation could cost or how long it could have. And I think what I've seen from like the most successful AI implementations, they're happening from organizations who have one or both of like a central AI council or a team or, like task force, you can call it whatever you want, but like a dedicated centralized group that's cross-functional, that is kind of steering, AI investments and helping these different levels set their expectations appropriately, doing true use case analysis, gap analysis, and all of that. And then also having, your AI governance, having, a true AI strategy. And we will only invest in these things at this time, or we're going to take this stepwise approach of start small and grow, expand, etc. And so I think, having either that central council and or a true strategy, even if it's not coming from a centralized council, those are the places that absolutely must focus on expectations from all of the different audiences who may have these expectations. And also the governance side, the council side, that really focuses on people. It focuses on process. You need to have processes laid out when you start to invest and explore in AI. And then you need to have processes laid out for, well, what does this change now about how we work, who we work with, who does the work. And so, again, it really goes back to like, if you just focus on the tech side of AI, you're likely going to come up with some failures.
Let's continue on the same thread. How do you position investment and change management for AI to senior leaders who may be change mature? At this webinar attendees company, they see the right investment in internal AI tools, the search knowledge capabilities supported, but the inability or lack of understanding to invest in deliberate change management to drive that ROI and usage. In essence, the tools are new and sparkly, but that doesn't mean anyone will use them to benefit the org. So, Joy, I think you had some thoughts on this as we are all looking at the question.
I do, and I'm probably not going to cover kind of the whole thing that you're driving at here,
Yeah.
Sam, but so there's a way in which, and I was sparked by this when Patrick was talking too, where it's like AI is new, it's a new tool, and everyone wants to talk about the like sparkly aspects, but in a way, it's a very classic change management problem, right? It's you have something where full adoption is dependent on human behavior. You have to have people pick these tools up and use them, unlike when you have kind of some sort of tech system implementation where it's just pushed down and there's not a lot of human behavior change that is required to make it happen. And kind of the classic thing in change management is the higher dependence of successful adoption is on behavior change, the higher your investment in change management needs to be, and the higher your ROI for doing so. So I think there's part of it, and as a change kind of person, we know to make that case as part of like, hey, as a senior leadership team, this is why you have to invest in change for this project. Maybe a little less so for that project, but for this one, it's really important. So I think that's definitely part of it. And then of course it's just, the what's in it for them in terms of the investment value.
Yeah, and I'll double back, and Patrick, you can add, because I know you've thought about and talked a lot about AI governance. You were just mentioning in your last call or in your last question. But when I read the question, how do you position investment and change to AI simulators who may be change immature, as well as we're not sure how it will benefit the org? To me, that says, hey, we're not sure how we're investing in AI as a capability. And if we don't have structure around that, if we don't have the proper governance that says, hey, this is the use case for our particular industry and for the particular functions in our organization, and this is how it will drive our outcomes, our business KPIs that are important to us. If we don't have that decision from our sponsors and leaders made, and it's more of a wild, wild west approach, it's going to be hard for change management to be the lead, if you will, when we don't have leadership necessarily making those AI investments crystal clear in how they develop the capability and how they roll it out. And so change management, of course, has to be assisted by great sponsorship, great leadership alignment, and I think, in my opinion, some targeted use cases and workflows that AI will benefit the organization. So yeah, Patrick, I don't know if there's anything that stuck out in kind of my answer to that question as well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. The question itself, but especially I think when, Joy and Riley, you were talking about it, my mind immediately went to, this recently developed AI readiness assessment. And, we didn't set out to develop an AI readiness assessment. It came from, we were trying to look at how does folks, determine the best use cases for AI? How does an organization determine their maturity around AI? And we realized that you actually got to start before that. You have to say, are we even ready to start investing in AI? Because, whether it's pressure from outside, pressure from market, pressure from employees, there's so much risk involved with just like jumping in and starting an investment or, even a small targeted use case. And so I think it's really around like, do we have a strong strategy in place already around tech innovations? Do we have governance around decision-making and investing? Do we know how much budget we have, how much time we have? And so, yeah, there's like 6 different categories we have in this like AI readiness assessment. And it's really all around like, hey, if you have certain things in place, you can kind of dip your toe into the water. But it also points out like, if you don't have these certain key areas like really thought about at all, especially if it's not coming from the top down, it's probably not time to start investing in AI, because we want to make sure that folks are getting the ROI from it and really understanding that what's in it for me.
All right, our next question, switching topics, sorry. What are the change skills job seeking kind of change advocate practitioners should be hunting up and mastering for 2025?
I could take a stab at this, but Chris, I will be transparent with you. I am totally on my development journey here too. So I can point out a few things that I have personally found helpful. And then I don't know if Patrick, if you jump in and say, hey, there's these 10 other tools you haven't even thought about yet. So for me, one of the things that's been really useful is using AI to do analysis of qualitative interviews. So a lot of the time when we start developing our change strategies, we go and we talk to so many people. And so now that we have this AI transcript, you can, if all the kind of privacy regulations align to what your project is and what you're working on, it's really easy to get, something like ChatGPT to analyze and provide those qualitative interview insights, which in the past has just been really time consuming. So that's one thing. It's just kind of using tools to do that. And then another thing is, when we're doing things like change impact assessments and things like that, having the fluency in all the different kind of Excel plugins, that's very one that's like top of my list for when I get more time to like figure out how to do that really well. But I've seen really cool things with it. So I think just having this familiarity with the new kind of toolkits and how they plug into the different change use cases is probably a good thing to think through for myself also. I don't know, Patrick, if you had anything to add to Chris there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned like utilizing AI to kind of help yourself prep or help yourself prep for interviews or even find trends. But what comes to mind to me is understanding the trends that we're talking about today, especially around like leaner change budgets. At the same time, change becoming more complex and more common. And so even say there's kind of two paths here. If it's a role that's specific to change management that someone's applying to, you can differentiate yourself by focusing on the like finance side, like the ROI that you're bringing by saying, hey, change is important and here's the actual impact we're going to receive. So a little bit of dipping your toes into some math, economics, and then related, dipping your toes into data and analytics. And so and this is also for whether this is a change specific role or a role that you want to bring your change skills into, and kind of whether it's pointing out trends that you're seeing with some data points behind them, or showcasing like models or frameworks for like actually measuring the impact of change, whether you're sending surveys or calculating like how much time is saved or money is saved or whatever. These kinds of skills that you're bringing into a change role or a role that you want to make kind of change related, absolutely can differentiate you. And going back to kind of what Joy mentioned, there's a lot of free or cheap AI tools that can help you develop those skills.
Yeah, and quickly, just yes, and AI is the short answer here. You get comfortable using AI tools to enable change, right? As much as AI is provoking change, we have to find ourselves within that environment to utilize the tools to enable change, would be the quick summary. And one of my quick recommendations is just understand how your organization is using AI. Most notably, they're probably turning on different AI solutions within their tech stack. So we've seen as some of our clients, converting Microsoft Teams into chatbots instead of developing an FAQ and putting it on the internet and hosting office hours, which, as I just say that, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of hours to do that. If we can enable a chatbot, that's like a simple solution. I think to what Joy mentioned around discovery activities. I know you mentioned interviews, qualitative assessments, even getting into change impact assessments, sentiment analysis during your change measurement strategy, all those things we can utilize and hasten and quicken our ability to measure change and prepare for change. And that's all just kind of using the tools that your company sets you up with before you go out. And I don't think what we're saying is go find the most leading edge tool, like use what started to get implemented at your company, use what you're comfortable with, and start to develop your portfolio of tools that are really consistent along the change journey. All right. Well, we afforded more time for questions. We filled the questions, so congrats to you all. I appreciate you all for helping us wrap the final 20 minutes here of the conversation. Yes, as Jillian said, thank you for joining, and please do reach out as you have questions for your change management and AI needs. We'll be sharing the recording afterwards, as Jillian has put in the chat, and look forward to continuing the conversations going forward. Appreciate y'all.